Hello, thank you for listening to A Glimpse of the Kingdom. I am David Pendergrass. I am so glad that you are listening to this podcast because I hope this marriage series has been helpful to you. I thank you for listening this far. You either got here on accident or it's proving to be some fruitful experience for you. Healthy belief number 5. Healthy belief number 5 is this. A healthy marriage exists when both persons have an integrated view of themselves and the spouse. Healthy marriage exists when both persons have an integrated view of themselves and the spouse. Integrated, of course, comes from the Latin, and it comes from the sense of whole. It means what we would use the word whole or full or complete. The opposite of that is called splitting. Splitting is when you cannot, or you choose not, to acknowledge or accept the bad or the good. You suppress one of them. Now, splitting can be a very serious psychological mechanism used by people called the borderline personality disorder. I know people with BPD, and that's an extreme case of it. But splitting can be any time. When a person has a difficult time tolerating any kind of overwhelming emotions, so they end up seeing someone as either good or bad. They're either idealized or they're devalued. And that helps you manage the emotions because you can't handle the emotions. That's it. So you acknowledge. It's when you do not acknowledge or you don't accept the bad or the good. You choose which one you split you might say down the middle, but you choose sides. So you suppress one and accept the other one. Now, there are many reasons why a person will split. And I mean, there many are. Some are real, I might say pretty severe cases is when there's a severe trauma as a childhood. That's, extreme trauma can do that. So when a child, teenager, adult, some kind of terrible trauma, some kind of pain, usually the brain the brain's going to shut down and you die, or you go crazy, or it splits, which means the personality can split and you have a dissociative disorder. In the extreme case, and it's not that it's unhealable, but in extreme case it happens particularly when people are in childhood, or even being an infant. And this happens with people who develop personality dissociative disorders, which used to be called multiple personality disorders, where there's an extreme kind of trauma and their brain splits off a different personality. Again, it's because it's a way of saying, it's a defense mechanism so that I'm not put right in the middle, face to face with that kind of trauma and pain and wound. It's too much to handle, and so it shuts down. It's very much like, it seems to me, it's very much like the coma. A coma is, of course, when the brain is so swollen or has gone through a lot of trauma and pain, and your brain just shuts down. It's like, forget this. I'm going to cause my body to work on the bare minimum so we can get our junk together. So that in many ways, that's what a coma is. Not always, but in many ways, that's the coma. A coma is a way to defend yourself against some kind of severe trauma or passing out. If the heat is too badly or someone's scared too much, the blood leaves the body. It's a way of saying you need to calm down. It's just too much. It's a defense mechanism. Well, on the extreme case, people can develop fairly severe disorders like personality dissociative disorder. But if you're not at that extreme, which is possible if you're listening to this, most people have some minor versions of that. And it is a fairly common occurrence when someone splits in the normal routines of life. In the normal routines of life, when it happens, either you're split with yourself or you split other people. And I'll talk a lot. That's what I'll talk about today, is that healthy marriages exist when you do not do that. Instead of splitting, you have what's called an integrated view. So there are different a little more minor reasons, but they're important why a person might split. For example, maybe you were raised in a household where you were told not to talk about certain things. Don't talk about don't bring it up. Don't make your dad mad. Don't make your mom upset. Don't make your Uncle Bobby nervous. No. Don't talk about grandma. No. And so what ends up happening is we tell people, be quiet. Or you might have a mom or dad who did nothing but praise their parents. They're the best ever. And they don't ever bring up anything negative. And so if you grew up in a home where you just were not allowed to talk certain things. You don't talk about how much mom or dad smoke or drink too much, or they cuss too much, or they were racist, or they were bigots, or they were this, or they were fundamentalist, or they were abusive. And you can't talk about those things. When you grow up in that kind of environment, it teaches you to split. You cannot bring up the bad. You can't bring up the bad. Some of you had the opposite experience where you had a mom or dad or whomever, all they did was talk about the bad all the time. You can't see the good. So there's not a silver lining. There's always gray cloud, no matter what it is. That can cause it. Oh my goodness, that can cause you to split. Maybe you grew up in a place where you were told to get over it or not to cry. Get over it. It's not that big a deal. I know he didn't break your heart. Get over it. She wasn't worth it. I know your mom walked out on us, but so what? She's a blank, 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 blank. So what? Don't cry. Man up. Woman up. Put on your big girl's panties. All those kind of stupid things people say teaches us to split. That's not healthy. It's unhealthy. When you tell someone to get over it, you're not encouraging them to interpret those events well. You are not encouraging them how to process things. You're teaching them to split, to suppress negative feelings, and to only acknowledge or accept the good feelings. We don't talk about sadness. We don't talk about pain and woundedness. We don't do that at all. And you might have had a parent. You might have a parent right now who does that, or a sibling, or someone who had authority over you, particularly when you were younger, who told you to get over and don't cry. Maybe you had parents who only praised you when things were excellent. When you're the top of the class, top of the football team, top of the speech, top of the debate, top of whatever, top, or very, very pretty, or very, very handsome, or whatever it is. If you're praised and you're excellent, what happens is it implicitly taught you that you don't talk about negative things. You only talk about or things when you fail. You only talk about things when you succeed. Maybe you were only critiqued, or maybe you're told to get better. It's any behavior that only allowed to focus on the positive or the negative. Now, in my experience so far, and my experience is limited, I haven't met a parent right now who did this on purpose. They try to teach their children how to split. So in my experience so far, it's always been learned on accident. And for some people, that's difficult to acknowledge because they live in denial. The parents never did anything wrong, and that's a very common thing. And I find that in counseling often. I say, when your mom and dad will tell me about them, and as soon as they start saying, if the conversation is brought up at all in the conversation, rather, that the mom or dad did something that was inappropriate or not their best, the person with whom I'm speaking immediately comes to the rescue. Well, they tried their best. Well, she was a single mom, but they tried. And you can tell I can tell very quickly that the person was trained not to talk about those kind of negative things, to not talk about mom and dad in that way, or not to talk back, or not this or that. And so that's evidences of splitting. Now, again, just to repeat myself one more time, that splitting can be in extreme cases or minor cases. But even in a minor case, even when it's done minor, it is quite unhealthy. Healthy individuals will not deny the bad, and therefore only focus on the happy or the positive. Healthy individuals will not deny the positive, and therefore only focus on the negative. They are integrated, or, to use another word, whole. They don't deny the bad, and therefore focus only on happy times and sunshine and count your blessings. Healthy individuals don't deny the positive. They thus focus only on the negative. Everything's horrible, everything's going to be bad, doesn't matter. Drama, 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 drama. They're integrated, they're whole. That's what healthy individuals do. And if you learn to split, and if you're that person right now, tend to be that way, you can heal from that if you want to. Or you can keep thinking your way is the best way, and that's, whatever. But if you want to heal from it, you can heal. There's counseling for that. To give you an example of when you did this, if you're married or if you're dating right now, is the courting, the dating. Now, I talked about earlier back in the belief number 1, and I said I'm going to come back to this, and belief number 2 a little bit too. But anyway, I'm here now again. The courting and dating stage, typically you hold things in common, you're fun, you did your best to impress the other person in order to win their affection. You acted like you're on the first job interview or first date almost all the time. Feel good chemicals released. It calls infatuation, sometimes called enchantment. And what happened is you overlooked annoying things in order to bond. We idealize. And I said this before, that's often happens in affairs. You say, well, I fell in love with them. No, you didn't. You became infatuated. You used enchantment. What you're doing is idealizing the other person. The problems arise when infatuation stops and reality hits. If you stay idealizing your partner, you'll be headed to divorce because of your great disappointment. Idealizing is a kind of splitting. That's what it is. It's splitting. It's the splitting where you choose to look on the positive all the time. That's it. And that's what happens. And many people who go through dating, and maybe at the first couple of years, there's a kind of a literal honeymoon and then metaphorical honeymoon for a while. And then all that kind of wears off. All of a sudden, I don't know, man. I don't look at them the same as I used to at all. A lot of times because reality hit. And what you were doing the whole time was splitting. And it's normal to do that at first for a little bit, like I'm saying, the courtship stage, a little bit. But if you don't realize that it will go away, it will cease, and that's normal to get over it, get on with life, you need to deal with reality. If you have a problem with splitting, you don't want reality. You only want your spouse to be handsome or pretty or perfectly in shape all the time or perfectly articulate. Or maybe when you met your boyfriend, girlfriend, spouse, whatever, they were very successful at a job or school or they seem like a big future or they own restaurants or whatever it might be. And then things change. And if you have a problem with splitting, you're going to have a hard time accepting reality. And that can lead toward divorce because you're not expecting the other person. You're not loving the other person. You're loving an idealized version of the person. Healthy marriages have two people who are integrated individually. They're also integrated within the marriage. So what that means is they don't split themselves on the inside. I'm only good and I'm only bad, or they tend to only see the positive and accept that and really only tend to accept the bad individually. They also don't do that within the marriage. So, for example, they don't split the spouse. Here's some examples of things that healthy marriages do use splitting terminology. They don't split the spouse. That is, they don't only focus on the spouse's flaws or problems, or only focus on the bright side and deny or ignore their weaknesses or failures, because they can't handle negative feelings or being hurt. They do not split the spouse. Oh, it doesn't really matter. Well, he means well. He means well. I know he calls me all those names, but he provides a lot for the family. I know that he hurts me sometimes, and sometimes he loses control and hits me. I know sometimes she just spends too much, but I know sometimes, but. You're splitting. When you choose to focus or chiefly focus on flaws or focus on the bright side, and you ignore the opposite because you can't handle the feelings, you're splitting. And that's unhealthy. You are not integrated. You're not being committed to a person, you're committed to an idealized person or just a pure villain in your mind. And remember, that's when it's really easy to have an affair. When you have a villain at home, and then you start idealizing someone else in the rest of your other part of your life, you're one step away from an affair. Because no one wants to go back home to a villain. They want to go out with a hero, and you idealize heroes. Hey, I'm going to take a quick break. Please listen real quickly. It can be difficult as a Christian to know what to do with our money. And there are all kinds of good books out there to read, but I encourage you, if you want something short and sweet and to the point, check out my book, Give It Away, on Amazon.com. It's very cheap. Go there today to get Give It Away, and it's a wonderful study to use in small groups. It has discussion questions and reflection questions ready to go. It's a 4-week study on how the earliest Christians used money and their possessions.
Have you read A Skeptic Challenges a Christian yet? This is Dr. David Pendergrass's amazing book. If you've not read it, you can get it on Amazon. And you could even buy one for a friend. Grab a copy and read it today.
Hey, it would help me a whole lot. If you like these podcasts, let people know about it. Just share the link. Just share the link. What would Jesus do? He would share the link. That's what I think. I think he would do that. Let people know about A Glimpse of the Kingdom today. Okay, let's pick back up where I left off. Healthy people don't project on their spouse because they can't or don't own their failures. Now, let's pause here for a second because I'm reading these out to make sure you understand them. This is commonly, a lot of people, there are a lot of terms, I guess, in any part of life, but psychology is one of them, where people use the terms incorrectly. They don't realize they're incorrect. Like people saying schizophrenia. They think schizophrenia is when you have personality dissociative disorder, and it's not that at all. Here's another one. When someone hears the word project or projection, they think they mean something else. Most people use the word projection in the sense of bridging, where you connect two different or unrelated events, but they're related by some emotional feeling. That's bridging. For example, I knew a young girl who was molested as a kid, and the guy would tend to pop popcorn. And for years, I'm not sure if this still happens, but years when she would smell popcorn, she would start feeling very, very anxious. Well, that's bridging. It's triggering a past trauma. And and as she's a young adult, smells popcorn. The person, she could cook the popcorn herself. She's not about to, no one's about to be raped or molested, but her brain triggers that, of course, for the past. That's bridging. And that can be a positive or a negative. Typically, it's used in a negative sense. Projection is different. Projection is when you split and you won't own your own failures or fears or problems or behaviors, whatever. You don't own them. You don't have that problem because you're splitting, because you can't do that wrong. Instead, what you do is you project it onto someone else, like a projector screen. You're the projector and they are the screen, and you dish onto them your crap, your junk, your inadequacies, your character problems, your fears, your failures, or whatever. And this is common. I've had people at church do this before to me. One guy was a severe narcissist who wrote me a letter and told me about how he wanted to meet with me to tell me how all my behavior has run people off. Now, clearly my behavior hadn't run anybody off. His behavior run people off, but he could admit it because he was a narcissist. I mean, it was a textbook thing you would expect from a severe narcissist. And he was the worst I'd ever, and I've met other narcissists. He was the worst. And anyway, so he projected onto me his behavior running people off, but no, I had run people off, and he wanted to help fix me. That's projection. Well, that's splitting. So that's what happens when people split. Healthy couples don't do that. Healthy couples don't project on their spouse because they can't own their own failures. I've heard that before in spouses. She's just so dim-witted. She's just so forgetful. Well, actually, she isn't at all. He is. But he dogs her all the time. The problem is he is, but he won't own it. And everyone knows, the couple knows that, or whatever. He's just such a gossip. Well, actually, she's a gossip, but she won't admit it, and she blames it on him because she can't admit that. That's the kind of splitting. Healthy couples don't do that at all. Healthy couples don't focus only on happy times. They also don't just have focus just on problems of the marriage. For example, they don't just focus just on tasks to be done, responsibilities for the kids, problems to be solved. If you did that, it means your marriage is based on problems. It's based on negative. It's based on negative because a problem is something negative needs to be solved. And so if in your marriage you have a splitting personality in your marriage, it means as a couple you are focused on either the good or the bad. And I'm saying healthy couples don't do that. They don't focus only on happy or only on problems or tasks. Then you have a problem-based marriage. Some couples only focus on the positive. They only focus on playtime or clubbing, buying the jet skis, going on vacation all the time. It's almost just playtime all the time. And they choose to focus on that almost exclusively, which means your marriage can't handle adult responsibilities well. And when your spouse chooses to grow up, you're ready for divorce. I knew a couple, this exact what happened to them. She grew up in, I knew the parents a little bit. I knew them enough to know the dad was a horrible tyrant. He might have been a narcissist, and she grew up and gained a good bit of weight and married a guy. I think he was, he's a Mexican, and that's on purpose because, he didn't want them to get married, and she did it on purpose, I'm sure, just to spite him. And she went clubbing all the time. This is a person supposed to be, her parents are very active in church, and she'd go clubbing and drinking, whatever. Eventually, they got the Mexican guy, and the white woman got divorced. And he came to me. He was a leader in the church, and he was heartbroken. He's like, David, I've done everything I can. I don't want to go clubbing. I don't want to get drunk. I don't want to do that. I'm a Christian. I don't think disciples of Jesus should do that. And also, I'm not 17. And she won't, and we have a child. I've got to take care of the son. We've got responsibilities. She wouldn't grow up. Well, that's splitting. And he said when we first married, we would have fun and so forth, but that was years ago. Well, that's just splitting. And when it happens, when he chose to stop, he didn't use that vocabulary, and that's fine. But when he chose to stop focusing on the club life and partying, they got divorced. And they ended up getting divorced. And that's unfortunate, but she wouldn't change her ways. It's like, nope. She's only going to focus on the free time. She's a free woman. She's happy now. And she's going to live the dream. Well, yeah, she's leaving it. She's living it single, last I heard. And she might be able to find another man who's like her, who just wants to go to the club forever. But eventually, what happens when you're 50 years old? Are you going to be clubbing in your 60? You're going to be the nursing home, going clubbing, looking for the thrill? I was watching a TV show today just for a brief second while I was in an office waiting to an appointment. And it was showing a rerun of this wife swap. And it had two different families, of course, and one was a couple, and they were like to go fun. He did pretend looking for monsters in the woods, and he would do this I can't remember now what it's called. It's not jet skis. You do it on top of a swamp, like the airboats. He'd all this kind of adult toys, you might say. He loved to play. And the mom was fussing at him, the swappy mom. Now, her son, they had invested like $100,000 in his rap career, and he's 9 years old, which to me is ludicrous. He's not even the rapper Ludacris, who actually can rap. But anyway, but she was fussing at this guy and going, "You have a son." And he goes, yeah, but I've got stuff I got to do. She goes, "Yeah, but you have a son. When are you going to invest in your son?" And he said, "Yeah, but a son is having responsibilities. It's not a passion." I mean, I can't fathom that. I can't fathom telling my own children, and he didn't tell his child. I hope he never did. I can't fathom seeing my children as mere responsibilities, not part of my passion. But that's it. In fact, in psychology, we call this the Peter Pan syndrome. They don't want to grow up. Well, that's a form of splitting. He just wants to play. He doesn't want a child. He doesn't want to invest. So his kid gets playing, video games all day long, locked in his room. That's splitting. Healthy couples do not do that. They don't focus on. Healthy couples also, they don't deny negative patterns in the marriage. For example, these are common ways I have found that couples split. And this is one right here where they deny negative patterns, like patterns of arguing. No, we don't argue. I mean, sometimes we have heated, but we don't argue. Patterns of inviting drama. I know couples that just, dadgummit, they're always in drama. Someone's mad at someone's sad, someone's upset, it's just like they're addicted to drama. And it's not always one, both of them, but sometimes it's just one person in the marriage. But sometimes there's two of them. And they might tell, well, yeah, and they might put a smirk on their face. Well, yeah, the makeup sex is really good, or whatever. There's just a pattern of inviting. Well, that's a negative pattern in marriage. They have patterns of making poor choices, patterns of joking all the time to avoid serious conversations. They're just always clowning around because they don't want to talk about other things. Whenever you avoid any kind of thing that you need to talk about, you're splitting. You're avoiding it. You think you can't handle the emotional state of, what if I have to talk about the bills, the debt, or I do need to get a job? Or maybe more serious things like, when are we going to talk about our kid dying? No, let's look on the bright side of life. God wants us to be happy. Joel Osteen told me it was a Friday every day. Every day's a Friday, and just look on the bright side and count my blessings, and name and claim it to be okay. That's splitting. That's nonsense. Now, most people headed to divorce do the opposite of what they did during the dating or infatuation phase. They focus only or chiefly on the negative, which of course helps you detach. You have to fight this temptation. If you're only or chiefly focusing on the negative of your spouse, you need to figure out why. Don't start writing up your divorce papers yet. Figure out why it is you're focusing so much on the negative. And you got to be honest about this. When I think of my spouse, am I chiefly upset or frustrated? Or do I go, ugh? Do I curl my lip? Do I roll my eyes? What's going on? Figure out why. It might be a really healthy reason why you're doing that. It might be an unhealthy reason. For example, is the spouse terribly toxic? Maybe there's a reason why you don't want, your temptation is to see the person as a villain. Maybe your spouse is a villain. Maybe your spouse is a narcissist. And you're like, I can't, every single thing I do, they make me feel condescended, and I'm an idiot, and I can't do anything right. They're always talking down to me, and so forth. Well, that's a healthy reason to see them as so negative, because if almost every interaction you have with them is negative, well, it makes sense you would have that disposition toward them. But you shouldn't get divorced right now. What I'm saying is that's you got to figure out why it is. Maybe there's unresolved grief inside of you. Maybe the spouse hurt you a long time ago. Maybe someone else hurt you a long time ago, and you're projecting on your spouse. I don't know. Maybe you're being selfish. Maybe you're being prideful. Maybe you like seeing that person as negative, or they're a villain, because it helps you feel self-righteous, makes you feel superior. Maybe you have a need to be in the one-up position where you're just better than everybody else or better than your spouse, and so you see him as less than you. Maybe you're the narcissist. Maybe you see your spouse as negative all the time because you really do think you're better than your spouse in just about any way. Maybe you're just looking for a way out because of another romance. That's very common. You're just looking for things that weren't that big of a deal, but now they are a much bigger, quote-unquote, bigger deal because you think Timmy's much cuter or Susie's much cuter. And you go, well, they really have been bad cooks all their lives, and they really have been a lot meaner than I thought. Now that I think about it, things are really horrible. That's just stupid. What you're doing is splitting. And the more and more you can get your spouse to look a villain, the easier this other person you're idealizing will look more and more heroic, and you're headed for an affair and a divorce. All because you did not acknowledge what was going on, and because you denied your covenant you made with God. It helps you have an affair. Splitting does. Splitting helps you have an affair. I'll say this one more time. If you're chiefly focusing on your spouse's bad, it increases the degree to which you may idealize, see the good in that other person. So don't do that. Don't do it. Integration, not being split, but integrated. Integration is so healthy. It helps you not have affairs. Now remember, as we wrap up, being integrated doesn't mean you accept bad behavior. Being integrated doesn't mean you accept bad behavior. It means you don't live in denial about the bad. I mean, for example, you must clearly label or identify the bad before you can change it. So it doesn't mean you accept the bad behavior. You're accepting that it happens. You're accepting that there is a thing. You're not living about denial about the bad anymore. Or you don't live in denial about the good. You must clearly label, identify the good before you can have healthy morale and joy in your marriage. For example, here's an analogy. I'm committed, like agape love committed. I'm committed to my kids when I clearly acknowledge the good and the bad in their behavior and speech. I am clearly committed to my children, though I fully acknowledge that they have good behavior and bad behavior. They have good habits and bad habits. They are righteous children, and they can be sinners. That is, they can sin. I fully acknowledge that in my core to my children, and I'm absolutely committed to them, and they're good. Period. So I'm not splitting toward my children. I'm not splitting myself. I see my kids as a whole, and that allows me to love them better and more. I don't praise them just when they've done something excellent or superior. I praise them to the good. I help challenge them when they're doing something bad and to get back to the good. Well, David, I always taught that in parenting, you just should always focus on the good. Well, I don't know why you were taught that. Maybe someone taught that they may have meant well. Now, in general, when I speak to my children, I want to say something encouraging. If I have to say something moral at all, absolutely. I do. It just means that, but I'm not split. I'm integrated, which means is I fully acknowledge that, A, they're going to do bad sometimes, and 2, I still love them. They're still a person, and they're still part of that. And C, I acknowledge, 3, and C, that is, I acknowledge it when it needs to be acknowledged. I'm not split. I don't live in denial that they can do bad, and vice versa. Sometimes a lot of times they do good. I don't know, but they're also going to fail too. They're going to fail a lot. I need to focus on that failure. That's what parenting is I got to ride them all the time and tell them, don't do that. You can do better. Be like your brother. No, that's bad parenting. It'll teach your kids that all they are is negative and they only get praised. Well, basically, they may never get praised. You might be the person whose parents never praised you. They thought good parenting was to fuss at you all the time, and that was horrible parenting. That's horrible parenting. Children don't need to be fussed at all the time. They need to be loved. And part of love is sometimes to fuss at them, but loving is not fussing at them all the time. Now, this last encouragement, because this is a really important integration, and that is this. Because integration is so important, whenever you're integrated, because you see the good and the bad, it means you rely heavily on forgiveness. Because you know that the other person is imperfect. When you face reality, you realize that in order to accept the bad, you must forgive. You do not, you must not, you cannot ever play fair in marriage. You can't play fair. Forgiveness means not to seek punishment. In a short nutshell, that's what it means. Forgiveness means not to seek punishment. Now, in a counseling sense, I might say forgiveness means healing the woundedness caused by someone's infraction or offense and not seeking punishment. Okay, but you might still have a wound that needs healing even though you don't have hatred or resentment toward your spouse. For example, when you hit me in my car, I still have a swollen leg because you broke it, and I need the hospital and physical therapy, even though I can choose not to sue you. I might have a wound that still needs healing, but that doesn't mean I'm trying to sue you or hurt you or it makes me happy to see you in jail. It's like that in marriage. A spouse can cause us wounds that still hurt and they're sad, but it doesn't mean I have to have the correlating belief of resentment and hatred, and I want to see you punished, and you get it. No. Now, how do I process forgiveness? Well, that's a good question. I did a 2 or 3 part series on my YouTube channel, and you go look it up. It's called Forgiveness and Grief. It's on my YouTube channel, Forgiveness, and I go through step by step, real slowly, how to forgive. Now, in a nutshell, you must fully identify the harm that was done. You process the feelings through grief. Then you work to rebuild trust only if the person proves to be trustworthy. Okay, you must fully identify the harm that was done. You must process the feelings through grief. Then you work to rebuild trust only if the person proves to be trustworthy. Forgiveness is not the same as reconciliation and all that, and I talk about that in my study. So I hope you'll go listen to the one on forgiveness. I talk about that. Now, if you continue to bring up the past, it means you still have unresolved grief. If you keep bringing up what happened a long time ago, it means you have unresolved grief, and it's your job to process the grief. Remember, it's your responsibility, 100%. If you're so wounded that you can't move on yet, it might be a complex grief, which needs counseling. Maybe, or if you have unresolved grief. Or 2, you're choosing not to forgive and choosing to stay focused on the negative. That is splitting. So that's it. If you keep bringing up the past all the time, if someone's hurt you, David, I'm looking at the bad they did, and when I look at the bad they did, it still hurts me a whole lot. Well, that means you haven't forgiven them fully. And you got to go through that. Well, if it hurts me, David, so much, well, that means you have unresolved grief, and it's your job to get to work working on the grief. Your job. It's not their job to make sure you grieve. It's your job now. It's, again, maybe they slammed into you with a car, but now it's up to you to go to the hospital and get physical therapy. Your leg won't get better on its own. And you denying that it ever happened won't make it good on its own. You only focused on the car wreck over and over and over and over and over. It doesn't make your leg better. That's not what heals it. Replaying the trauma of the car wreck doesn't heal a leg. You need to go to a different place, go to a hospital, work through processing, interpret that event a different way. Now, you might be so overwhelmingly wounded even after counseling. Deep counseling is something called complex grief, but your counselor will know what that is. But most people, in my experience, I've met one person I think really suffer from complex grief. Everyone else I've ever experienced, they have unresolved grief. They just haven't cried enough. They haven't grieved enough for a variety of reasons. The other reason why you might bring up the past over and over is because you're choosing not to forgive, like I said, and you're choosing to focus on the negative, which is splitting. Maybe you haven't spent enough deliberate time on your healing. Maybe you get some satisfaction in being in the one-up position of your spouse because you feel superior, because you have a low self-esteem, or maybe you feel safer and that you won't get hurt again. I could get a lot of reasons why a person might not want to forgive or want to focus on the negative for splitting. But whatever it is, a counselor's going to help you figure out why. So when you focus on the bad, or any bad event at all, and you're still bringing up the past wounds, you've got some grieving to do, and you can through forgiveness. You can. So here's some questions worth thinking. Are you integrated? Are you integrated? Do you split? Think about your own pattern, your own behavior. Are you refusing to see reality, which involves both good and bad? What aspects of yourself do you have a tendency to deny? And what aspects of your spouse do you tend to deny? What aspects of your marriage do you tend to deny? What will you do to become more integrated? What's something you need to forgive your spouse for? And are you actively seeking to work toward forgive? And if not, why are you holding on to it? So these are things to process. And this healthy belief number 5. Healthy marriages exist when both persons have an integrated view of themselves and the spouse. God bless you. See you next time. Well, the conversation isn't finished. You can always reach out to me on social media. Are you on Facebook? I am too. At Glimpse of the Kingdom. Glimpse of the Kingdom on Facebook. Be sure to like it and you can see updates there. Also, if you're on Twitter, check me out at Dr. D. Pendergrass, at Dr. D. Pendergrass, or at Glimpse the King, at Glimpse the King. And I try my best to respond to comments and questions on there as quickly as I can. If you want more, there are many more resources on the podcast and my blog. Go to my website, davidpendergrass.com, and you can see a full list of the podcast, and my blog is available for free. Are you active in a church right now? I'd be happy to come out to your church and do all kinds of classes and workshops there. Check out davidpendergrass.com, davidpendergrass.com for more information. And may God in His great grace give you even just a glimpse of his kingdom this week. See you next time.